Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 2025 Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. This is the first event, and we are now entering the knockout stage here in Weissenhaus in Germany. There are 10 players, 8 of them make it to the knockout, 2 of them are playing for 9th and 10th place, which is important because you score points and ultimately win prize money for the duration of the entire tour. Today, the matchups are as follows. Magnus Carlsen versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov, Alireza Firouzja versus Vincent Keymer, Hikaru Nakamura versus Jawahir Sindarov, and Fabiano Caruana versus Gukesh. And before we get into the matchups today, I posted about this on social media yesterday, but in case you missed it, Firouzja was number 1, Sindarov was number 2, and Fabiano Caruana were in the top 3 of the round robin. Firouzja got to choose who his opponent was between Hikaru, Nodirbek Abdusattorov, Gukesh, and Vincent Keymer. He chose Vincent Keymer. Because of that 4, he felt that that was probably his best chance of victory. Sindarov made the most interesting and controversial pick because he had to choose between his countryman, Nodirbek, who probably he was not going to choose, Gukesh, and Hikaru. Gukesh is the world champion. He's more active than Hikaru. And Hikaru is 2,800 and a perennial top 5 player in all formats. But he chose Hikaru, the more experienced player, leaving Fabiano to then choose between Gukesh and Nodirbek, and leaving Magnus with the other opponent. And Fabiano chose Gukesh. Fabiano chose to play the world champion. He could have let Magnus end up playing Gukesh. That would have been extra content. But he plays Nodirbek, and Magnus ultimately is left with he chose Gukesh, and Magnus is left with Nodirbek. So we're going to get into all of these games. Really exciting stuff. It's a best of 2, and if they are not able to settle it via the best of 2, then they are going to play a tiebreak. But obviously today we only have 1 game. Now, here we go. All right, we've got Magnus Carlsen versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov, and Magnus opens with the move f4. All right, we take a look at the position. It's obviously the back row of pieces is shuffled. This is freestyle chess, Fischer random style, although certain positions that have already been played in this event are not going to be played again. They are not in the random lottery. And by opening up with this move f4, by the way, for the record, absolutely every single person who played with the white pieces at some point played the move f4. You open up the bishop to target the pawn over here. All right, there is a rook trapped in the corner, and it's obviously the best move. And for black, the best way to play is generally to do the exact same thing. Nodirbek does that. He plays that, right? And, Magnus himself has had a game where both he and his opponent counter-trap each other's rooks with bishop takes pawn and bishop takes pawn. He actually had a game that I covered recently on this channel. There is no chance you remember that game. Bigger chance you remember what you ate for breakfast on like September the 3rd, 2018. Okay, some of you were born on that day. I mean, you do not remember this game, but sometimes you can trap each other's rooks, and actually that's what they did. A lot of the players played moves like knight b3, knight b6, and then sort of developed their pieces, but these guys went like this. And Magnus here played this move e4. This is a very, very provocative and interesting move. And essentially, the point of this move is that there are some variations where black is not able to capture this rook. And what I mean by that is, for example, f takes c4. Here, white can consider the move pawn to g3. And after pawn to d5, bishop g4 is a check. And after this move, you get away with your rook by castling. That rook would have castled that way, and this rook is still trapped. Now, the crazy thing about this position, after something like pawn to g6, is that black is actually better, because he has an extra pawn, and because somehow the pawn structure and the activity of this queen supersedes having a rook. Like, black is going to lose a rook, white is not. Now, Magnus hypothesized that that is why, in this position, rather than taking the pawn, because he was a little bit, he was a little bit concerned about that, Nodirbek decided to go here and then take. But what's fascinating about this position is that already he is worse. The thing about this format is you can accidentally stumble into a terrible position, and Magnus understood that. Magnus understood that rook is not going anywhere. I can leave my bishop there and just make incremental improvements. And Nodirbek actually overthought a little bit in the opening, and after g3, he's already quite a bit worse. And, when the queens are on the corner in Fischer random chess. Again, you have to understand, like in freestyle, there are certain rules adjusted to the original format, such as not replacing the original position, right? The positions that are drawn ultimately get removed from the lottery pool of positions. So it's kind of like a modified format, right? But in the overall format of shuffling the pieces on the back rank, there is there is a need to get the queen out like this. And so that is what Magnus goes for here. And now he has time. He's just not going to take this rook. Nojibek spending a good amount of time in the opening and finally forces Magnus to move. And we get the following position. This is good for white. It's good for white because the queen is more active than the counterpart. Black has a very difficult time getting these pieces into the game and also getting a comfortable pawn structure. Somehow these two pawns getting left alone feel very weak, and these two pawns, whichever one of them moves, is also going to feel quite weak. And so after just the simple like knight b3, white just has a very considerable advantage from the opening. So after 9 moves, Nojibek is under considerable pressure. And already Magnus has ideas like simply grabbing the bishop, for example. And after grabbing the bishop, he's going to have pressure down the center line. And maybe he will take even more space, and maybe he will activate his bishop. And his bishop and his queen are going to ultimately create some form of an attack over here. That is all the stuff that is, on the table. Nojibek goes knight c7. This move is given a question mark by Game Review, but the evaluation is around the same. It's all around 1.0. I don't really know why that's the evaluation of that move. But now queen b4, and the thing is, Nojibek had to do something. For example, if Nojibek had played this move, which looks very natural, you're still going queen b4. It's not the fact that the bishop is under attack, it's the fact that the attack shifts this way, and white just gets a very powerful initiative. Not to mention, anytime white wants, white can also reposition the knight into the middle. So white is just doing everything here, and black is not doing much at all. Okay, so knight c7, right? Queen b4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight d5, and the queen slides over here. And Nojibek is really feeling the pressure. He's really feeling the pressure because, again, every move that Magnus has is virtually a threat. Magnus keeps raising his hand to do something, throw a punch, and Nojibek's like, at any moment something can happen. And to his credit, he's actually playing quite well. He's activating the rook and everything. He's trying to fight back in the center of the board. Here white has many options. You can play e4, you can play bishop f3, you could play c4. During the live broadcast, I actually had predicted that Magnus would play bishop f3. The reason is it brings a bishop and also, a rook into the game at the same time. I felt like this was a Magnus-style move rather than overextending, and lo and behold, it took me 2 seconds to say. It took Magnus 10 minutes and 52 seconds to play, which obviously means I'm, a formidable player in my own right. But joking aside, of course, Magnus also kind of wanted Nojibek to play this move, by the way. Why? Because if you're going to attack someone, you kind of prefer the center is locked and not in any danger of being opened. Also, this is actually a weakness. And once you kick out the knight and slide the rook over, every piece is playing. And here, perhaps the move of this entire thing. By the way, the crazy thing about this position is it's only been 15 moves, 16 moves, right? This is white's 16th move. And yet black is already on the ropes. Right, like it's just a considerable amount of pressure. Now, we talked about rook d1, but there's another way to activate the rook here. And if you're a strong player, you'll be able to figure this out. You activate a piece without moving it. King c2. The rook is going to a1. There is absolutely nobody remaining on that side of the board to protect the king. Magnus protecting the pawn on c4, which was targeted by the queen. d6, rook a1. And now a massive mistake. And the thing is, already here, maybe Nojibek, instead of trying to play defense and get his knights into the game, should have even been considering a counterattacking measure. The point is that if after h3, knight, the knight can go back to f6, but actually can continue its journey forward and even go to d3. So Nojibek could have actually just put the knight on d3, which at least would have given Magnus something to think about. For example, here he can play queen a7 and he can play knight a5, but then there's rook b8, and then white here would need to find the move c5, which is the only move actually to get any sort of advantage, trying to go queen b6. If black plays here, there's queen b6, sacrifices, and a rook infiltrating over here. So, but you would have needed to be more active, but somehow it felt like Nojibek in this game just simply never found his footing after the opening. I think he was kind of surprised by the way that Magnus played this, and ultimately he just couldn't deal with the transformations of the position. He played a little bit too passively, And Magnus just got every piece to every good square, and generally when you have 4 pieces attacking a king like this, there are going to be tactics and sacrifices. So you push everything back. Already white can play knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, and queen takes a6, but then black will play defense. Magnus plays even more surgically, pawn to b5, removing the defense completely, and sneaks into b6, sandwiching behind the pawns. Everything is under attack. Knight c6 is a threat, and knight before check. The king slides into the center of the board, and Nodirbek Abdusattorov resigns the game. Magnus Carlsen wins his first quarterfinal matchup with an accuracy of 99%. Now, you know, there was a very famous interview in the National Basketball Association, Russell Westbrook interview, where he gets asked, Russ, did you guys win this game or did the Jazz lose this one? And obviously that's a kind of a crazy question, but I do feel like this sort of applies in this case. I think Magnus played an absolutely fantastic game. He understood the position extremely well, but I do feel like he was also helped a little bit by Nodirbek. Like, I mean, first of all, Nodirbek, you know, in this position, yeah, you can argue he kind of saw a ghost and he misevaluated, but it's very common in this format. But Nodirbek essentially lost this game on the 3rd move, which is kind of bewildering in this format. And then, of course, people can debate whether they like that or not, right? But for some people, it's very exciting, and for, you know, diehard fans are like, I don't want to see my favorite player losing in 3 moves. I want to see him losing in 2 moves. But yeah, I mean, just a fantastic game for Magnus, and obviously a different player playing for the white side might have not won the game like this, but he still had to harmonize all his pieces. But I mean, he made it look easy. He wins, and tomorrow he has the black pieces, and Nodirbek has to win. Now, this was, again, the most controversial game of the day. And by controversial, I just mean fascinating. This is Javahir Sindarov playing against Hikaru Nakamura. Javahir chose this man. He chose him. Like when he, when he could have played Gukesh. And obviously he was never going to play Nodirbek because, well, they're both young guys from Uzbekistan. They want to see each other succeed, unless they are playing each other in a final match. So it was quite clear, like I predicted he would pick Gukesh. I predicted that Fabiano would pick Nodirbek, and I thought 4 and 5 are Hikaru and Magnus. So I thought we would be getting Hikaru and Magnus. But then, yeah, he picked Hikaru, and it's obviously to challenge himself, and it's also obviously to let the next generation know that he's here and he doesn't really respect any of them. By the way, we see the exact same opening played in this game as we saw in the opening of this game, right? F4, F5, but obviously here the sides didn't block. So we have this, we have pawn takes, rook takes, and actually Fabiano and Gukesh followed this exact same thing. Bishop d5, the rook goes back, and essentially, you know, black activates the bishop and now plays a very high-level move. Just an amazing move here. Queen g8. I mean, this is why Hikaru is 2802. And he might have played this because on the other board, Fabiano actually did the same thing, and the players can see each other's boards. Yes, that's a real thing. Maybe he was inspired by the way that Fabi was playing this, but I mean, okay, the computer, likes a lot of different things here. It also likes bringing the knight out and being quite provocative, but this is, and then here, rather than putting the bishop on c6 and putting pressure on this pawn, not really allowing white to activate his queen, Hikaru went back, which when I saw this, I was like, what? What? And now, white just gets a nice space advantage, and I thought, and obviously Hikaru is playing like the bishop to c7, and then he's going to move the pieces a certain way. But I was like, wow, I mean, this is like jigs, this is crazy style. I mean, I don't understand anything about the position. Here, Javahir, I thought might try to develop over here, but he long castles. His rook hops over. It's all about freeing up the squares. You could have also played bishop f2 and castled like this. But long castle, and then on the very next move, Hikaru does the same thing. So this is the position. Both guys have committed their kings, and now it's just about what's going to happen in the center. This game is going to be decided by pawns. The thing is, if you told both guys right now their pawns can't make any moves, I mean, they would either agree to a draw or both just leave the tournament hall. Like, pawns in chess ultimately determine whether or not you're making progress into a position. They determine whether the position is open or closed based on how many pawns are remaining. Pawns are the soul of chess, all right? And, Gotham and his community are the soul of chess recaps. Fantastic. Remember the days that I said you're worth more than a queen? Those were the days. Most of you are worth more than a queen. Most of you. Some of you I see sometimes in the live chat of chess streams. I don't think I've ever seen a worse, well, maybe in like football clubs, but chess live stream chat is, yeah, just go to one for a little bit and go check it out. D4, G5, right? So now the pawn play is beginning. And Javahir plays F5. Hikaru immediately shuts the center. And around this point, you know, Hikaru had to give up his light squared bishop, but he started taking over the game. The pawn play was clearly understood better than him. This was a bad structure. And the move that Javahir had to play here was quite deep. He had to phantomly defend this pawn by playing bishop to e2. Obviously, if queen f5, you play bishop h5. And what's kind of wild about this position is that, you know, if black had played a move, let's say like g4, the bishop goes here. So Javahir in that position had to reposition the bishop to the d3 square to protect the pawn on f5. He did not pick up on this and instead tried to do it like this. And all of a sudden, Hikaru was winning a pawn no matter what. You say, what do you mean no matter what? Pawn takes, knight takes. Yes, the threat is pawn takes g4. And then queen f4 check. Actually, this is also a threat because of queen f4 check. So what you can do here after knight e6 is you can play king b1. But after h4 and a knight coming to f4, black is just better. White's bishops are not very good. I mean, bishops like open space. Let me tell you something right now. They're not getting any of that nonsense on this board. It's only the person with the knights that is happy here. And because of that, what ends up happening is Hikaru just ends up a pawn. Javahir is like, well, I don't want my bishops to be trapped inside all day, so I'm going to play the position like this. And I'm going to play the position in a way my bishops might actually have a future. The queen goes to h5 for Javahir. Let it be known, by the way, that Hikaru is up 22 minutes on the clock. Selecting this man to be your quarterfinal opponent is a bad idea because Hikaru has this... He has an ability as a competitor at the highest level for the last 20 years to basically say, oh, you want to play me. See, if like one of these if I was chosen by a player to play them in a match, I would immediately start getting into my own head. Because I'm a regular human who makes recaps. I don't play chess at the highest level. Hikaru probably was like, you want to play me, huh? Okay. Well, you're going to have to find out. And yeah, 20-minute time advantage on the clock. Just surgically bringing the position down into an endgame. The knight has to go back. Okay, he didn't play this the best way, according to Stockfish, but again, he's still doing well, and ultimately, at the end of the day, he's just the pawn up, and what's going to happen is that pawn is going to make it to the end of the board, and his pieces are running circles around Javahir's, right? Knight to e3 takes. Now we have a knight versus bishop endgame, and ultimately, it's just a matter of time. Like, you're going to remove these pawns, and it's going to be these two boys, and they're going to just start marching down. This is absolutely clinical. 4 minutes versus 19. He's also doing it quickly. Look at this, and there it is. 2 connected pawns on the board and 1 extra pawn. It's completely winning, and now it's just a matter of technique. c5, knight f4, bishop f3, king c7, and now there is a winning concept here that goes like this. Pawn to d3. That doesn't really matter where black goes. Let's say white plays king c3, king d1. Doesn't really matter. You can play e2. It looks like you're just on the precipice, right? Like you just need... You don't have a move here, actually. The only winning idea here for black is actually to give up a pawn, which is quite wicked. And the point of this is that if it's captured, the knight goes back, and the pawns can't be taken. This pawn is falling. And if c6, the cherry on top is you ignore it again and play knight d4 attacking the bishop. So this is how Hikaru needed to win this position. He needed to get to the exact right setup. He needed to time this move a5. a5 is wicked stuff. And if b5, it's the same thing. Knight e6. If c6, he can take it. But he needs to preserve at least one pawn on the queen side to then ultimately make sure that pawn promotes in the long run. But first he misses it. And he's trying to position and find the way forward, right? And he obviously can't repeat moves, so he goes king d7. And Javahir plays b5, because what else is he going to do? And now king e6, and now a5, and now the king comes back, and Hikaru's waiting. He thinks at some point Javahir is going to run out of moves. King c7. And now what Hikaru had to do here was walk away from the check. I mean, it's not easy at all, but he needs to play knight g6 while his king is on b8. And the reason for this, let's say bishop e2 and knight to g6, right? The reason he needs to do this is that now he can play knight f4, bring in his pawns, and ultimately win the game. but he mistimes it and he plays knight g6. And now it's all different because when this trade happens, the pawns were traded. He had to trade Hikaru because had Hikaru gone king b8 right away, you would have ended up in a similar position, except now the king cannot escape. There's king d, the king is going to run up and white is going to trade off the remainder of the pawns. And that is ultimately what happens, which is absolutely crazy. Java here makes a run for it. His heart rate here was 150. 150 in the middle of a chess game. That is absolutely unheard of. He loses his bishop, but his king makes it to b5. And he's going to trade off Hikaru's pawn. So Hikaru had this moment, he had to play a5. That was the only winning idea, which was not particularly simple. I mean, it's very easy to sit and go, oh, a5. So he needed to sacrifice his pawn. He misses it. Java here saves the day at the last moment. The knight has to give checks. It's right. The king has to trade, and the players make a draw. That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Now Java here is drawn. What a save by him. And tomorrow he still has to play black. Overall, 90+% of this game was Hikaru outplaying Java here, but he clutched it out at the end. And what can you say? I mean, he's probably on top of the world. Now, we do have a game for 9th and 10th place. By the way, a similar opening to something you've seen before. But as you can see, Fedoseev going for f6 instead of f5. It's not a bad move, but by far more energetic was f5. These guys are playing for some cash, but also for points in the overall standings of the tournament. And in this game, I mean, listen, playing for 9th and 10th place is going to lead to like a barn burner of a game because, you're playing like you've got absolutely nothing to lose. And yeah, they took a totally different route, but, a route that in the long run just ended up being very good for Levon because he had a very good space advantage from the opening. Fedoseev was provoking him just a bit too much. And it was Levon who traded at the right moment. Pretty soon it was a little bit too late to castle. And, well, this is going to be quite dangerous. Knight to a4, rook to g1. And I'm just not sure that this is going to cut it. Levon plays very, very nicely, combining the threat of a break here and a break here. And he trades down. He marches beautifully through the position and simply wins a rook. And he wins the game. And probably, Fedoseev is going to have to bounce back tomorrow. Ultimately, this one, queen c2, a nice little final touch. You're going to just pick up everything on the back rank. And Levon winning in nice fashion. Of course, this is the 9th and 10th matchup, so I won't spotlight it a huge amount, but a very nice game. And then I will end with Firouzja versus Keymer, as well as Gukesh versus Caruana. So Firouzja versus Keymer was a game that we already saw played over here. This was how this one developed, with a rook in the center, but this one took a completely different turn. So after fe4, rook e4, and c6, you can play bishop d5. That was the move that Hikaru opted for, but it was Firouzja who early on spent he spent 33 minutes on this next move. 33. Let me tell you something right now. As a guy that frequently overthinks things in his classical chess games, if you spend 33 minutes on a move, there's a good chance it's going to be a wild move. Firouzja decides that the best way to coordinate his pieces in the long run is to play the move h4, trying to bring the queen up via the h-file. Notice how nobody has done this yet, right? So either you're going to go pioneer your own journey and do the right thing, or it's going to backfire in spectacular fashion, right? Bishop c7 is the move. He brings the queen out. But from the opening, it was quite clear that queen h2 and queen h4 is not the way. You're losing time, right? And here Vincent finds an incredible counterattacking move. Rook e7 is the move that white wants to play, but queen g8 is the defense to that, because if you take this pawn, there is the unbelievable move pawn to g5, getting in the way. And if en passant, you play knight takes, and rook takes. Then you win the pawn on f4, and white still has 5 out of 7 pieces on the home ranks, and 5 out of 8 pawns that haven't moved yet. So obviously the position just looks like something from a fever dream. This looks like you have a fever of 103, whatever that is in Celsius, like 40 or something. And yeah, and I mean, the pieces are just flying all over the place. And yeah, Vincent completely in control from the opening. f5, he plays pawn takes. And I mean, Firouzja is going to have to find a way to castle queenside. He's got his 3 pieces that are snuggling. But overall, it's not a very good position. The only thing that can happen here is that Alireza tricks him somehow. But ultimately, Vincent is no longer up a pawn, but just has a much more dominant position. And he's going to... Look at this. This is a fantastic move. Trading the queens into an endgame. This is really, really high-level stuff. Bringing the rooks and just utilizing the advantage of the development. Firouzja never got these pieces into the game, right? Alireza, I should say. Queen e3, queen f4, very nice technique. Okay, king c8, maybe not the best. And now we have a scramble. We have 5 minutes versus 30 seconds on the clock. Firouzja desperately trying, right? But bishop takes h5. And you just never even got to castle. And let this be a lesson. Of course, Firouzja resigning here because queen takes bishop is a huge threat. This serves a lesson that in this format, you must respect the element of time. When you start playing, and I'm not coaching Firouzja, I'm kind of coaching the audience. Once you start playing things like h4, queen h2, queen h4, up along the edge of the board, in all likelihood, as the opponent is bringing out all of their pieces, it's just not going to work. So Firouzja, yeah, in this format, from rapid to classical, just kind of overthought things, thought for 33 minutes. That's enough time in the previous days to play 3 games, right? And he spent that on 1 move. So he loses with the white pieces, but the good thing about this format for Firouzja and for Firouzja fans is that you don't lose after 1 bad game. And also tomorrow the starting setup is completely random and there is no, particular structure. So, but yeah, an amazing win for Keymer. And the amazing thing here is that Firouzja chose him. He chose him to play against him and try to beat him. So that's pretty epic stuff. And last but not least, we have this game between Gukesh and Fabiano. This one I'm, going through the opening because we've already seen this, and this is where the game ultimately went a different direction, as Sindarov in this position played knight to e3 and Hikaru went bishop f7, whereas Gukesh played bishop f2, which is another one of the moves, and then Fabi provoked him, and he went f5 and knight f4. Look at Fabi. I mean, confidently trotting into the center of the board with his pieces, and then e5, a counter-attacking move from Fabiano in the center of the board, giving up the bishop completely. Why? Because of the element of time. Because I think Fabiano is like, the more time that Gukesh spends capturing my pieces, the more time I get to kind of adapt to the position. Still, of course, Gukesh, space advantage and 2 bishops cannot be understated. We already saw what the 2 bishops did, or rather, not the 2 bishops, but what the light-scored bishop was able to do versus the dark-scored bishop in the Fabiano, the Magnus versus Nordirbeck game. And, from the early opening, it was still Fabi consolidating. By the way, the move I love the most in this game is rook a1. This is swagger. This is swagger right here because, we saw Sindarov long castle, right? We saw both of those guys use this rook to jump over here, but Gukesh is going to use that rook as a bazooka. So the king can now no longer castle. It's just going to sit on the c1 square, and you haven't seen anything yet. a4, a5, Fabiano not allowing him into the position. Knight to c5. By the way, you could have played knight takes a5. You are not hallucinating. And then there would have been rook a8 and some sort of counterattack, but... We have knight to c5, Fabiano playing knight to d5 into the center of the board, and Gukesh advancing with g5. Now, this is the critical moments of the game here, as both guys have 14 minutes on the clock. This is a rivalry that has been budding for some time. They've played at the Olympiad, for example, but it is Fabiano taking over the game with queen b4, abandoning Gukesh's pawns on the right side of the board, 1 square away from promotion. We have knight to c5, rook e7 was the move here. But instead, he plays d4, disconnecting these 2 pieces. The move that proves an advantage here is promoting a queen. Rook g8, rook e5 would have been the approach. Knight bd5, and here you can play here, d3, rook a3 to defend your king. I mean, I don't even know what you want me to say. Like, this is ridiculous stuff. Gukesh does not find that. He is a human being. And then here Fabiano blunders to queen f1, and Gukesh here with his rook hanging has to play the move queen f4. He has to sack his queen, pick up a rook and a knight, and then play c3, and knight takes d4, and say that he is doing well. Just give up the queen. But, I mean, it's not easy at all. He has to play queen takes f4 with 4 minutes remaining. The thing is, maybe in classical chess, Gukesh sacrifices the queen. In classical freestyle, it's a little harder. He plays the more human approach. Fabi goes for a queen trade. Gukesh now, again, one more chance. The final chance to sacrifice the queen. He doesn't. He doesn't sacrifice the queen. And trading the queen is actually such a bad move, according to the computer. It gets a double question mark. Knight takes d4. Knight d6, and now Gukesh sacrifices the rook. I'm not going to yell it because the position is in the balance, and it's anybody's game. The bishop is trying to help the pawn promote, and it does promote, But ultimately, at the end of it, there is rook a1, and in the scramble, it is Fabiano Caruana asserting himself. 2 pawns can become queens here. They are just going down the board, but the king, the knight, and the rook are very, very close to stop them. King e7, a mistake apparently, but this as well. I mean, I don't even understand why, because bishop d3, rook here, I guess it's knight f3. This is how Gukesh had to defend himself. I feel like the patterns of this format, which kind of lead to really complicated structures, made Gukesh make these mistakes, because I feel he's completely capable of finding stuff like this, but he wanted to play for h4, and ultimately, he does it in a way where he's going to lose material. But the craziest part about this, it's not even about the defense. Fabiano Caruana has pawn to f2 check and rook to f3. Both guys are going to make queens, but only one of them is going to deliver checkmate. If king takes f3 is played, f1 queen appears, and Fabiano Caruana, for the first time in a while, in a classical chess game, defeats Gukesh. A wicked game, wicked back and forth battle. I mean, both guys had chances. If Gukesh had found that queen sacrifice, that would have been unbelievable. But ultimately, Fabiano asserts himself. He wins the game. Keymer beats Firouzja with the black pieces as well. Nakamura was so close to beating Sindarov, also with the black pieces. And really, the only wins with white were in the 9th and 10th place game. And here, obviously, this game was wild and wacky, and anything could have happened. And in the Carlsen game, where in 2 of those games, black got into trouble immediately. So ultimately, your standings are as follows, right? And the winner between Keymer and Firouzja plays the winner of Carlsen, Nojibek. And then it's Sindarov, Hikaru moving on to play the winner of Fabian Gukesh. But anything can change tomorrow. And I will see you all for the 4th day of action here at the first event of the 2025 Freestyle Grand Slam Tour. If you would like some tickets to the European Tour, I highly recommend getting them. The Brussels event is nearly half sold out. VIP tickets are going as well. Those are a little pricier, but they get you early access to venue. They get you a meet and greet, signed pictures. They get you a nice VIP experience. Might have some food and drinks for you as well. So check out the link in the description. If you are still missing my announcements about the Europe Tour, it is Brussels, London, Vienna, Berlin, Munich, and Warsaw, Poland in May of this year. See you all tomorrow. Get out of here.